Was Jann Mardenborough actually bullied in the GT Academy? Did his infamous crash make him want to quit? From composite characters to mangled timelines, here's a rundown on how much they altered the true story behind Gran Turismo. No one in Gran Turismo explicitly claims that Jann Mardenborough is the first ever international champion of GT Academy. However, since we witness a fictionalized version of the program's conception at a meeting in Japan, followed shortly thereafter by Jann's victory and eventual contract signing, it's about as heavily implied as it could be. As it turns out, Jann was actually one of the winners of the third GT Academy, which took place in 2011. The inaugural search for a gamer who could make it as a racer took place in 2008, when 22 contestants from across Europe faced off against each other. Two men, Lucas Ordóñez of Spain and Lars Schlomer of Germany, were both declared winners, but only Ordóñez made it to the Dubai 24. GT Academy was held again in 2010. This time, France's Jordan Tresson prevailed. A year later, the competition expanded to the United States, and two more champions were crowned, Mardenborough in Europe and Brian Highcotter in America. He may not have been the first, but of all GT Academy's alumni, he's had the longest and most productive tenure in motorsports. In Gran Turismo, a marketing executive named Danny Moore travels to Tokyo to pitch an idea to Nissan's top brass. With retail sales in decline and interest in muscle cars at a low point, Moore suggests tapping into the fandom of the Gran Turismo video game series. His presentation gets a lukewarm response, but a representative from the group tells him the company will approve his plan, so long as he can ensure the participants' safety by hiring a supervising engineer. Moore's dream quickly becomes a reality, but when the socially awkward Jann wins by a millionth of a second over the charismatic American Matty Davis, the mastermind of the whole operation tries to game his own system. Moore is eventually depicted as being supportive of Jann, though he remains concerned about the brand first and foremost. In real life, a Nissan employee named Darren Cox dreamt up the idea for GT Academy. It took Cox, who was a general manager for Nissan Europe at the time, 3 years to get his pet project off the ground. After the Academy proved to be successful, he went on to become Nissan's global brand head and global motorsports director before founding his own esports company. While Moore is undeniably inspired by Cox, the name appears to have been changed so that filmmakers could take more liberties with the character. On screen, Jann learns about GT Academy at the same moment that he learns he's been chosen to compete in the first round. A friend sees his name on a monitor at a local gaming cafe, and when they press play on the accompanying video message starring Danny Moore, Jann discovers he was selected because his last race in that particular console clocked in as one of the fastest times in the world. He barely makes it to the qualifier, which sees him driving at the same Gamerland. The way the first act of Gran Turismo unfolds isn't very accurate to the actual story, as we mentioned previously. Jann told ESPN that he booted up his PlayStation one morning and there was a new menu that advertised GT Academy tryouts. He purposefully entered the competition in 2011 after turning 19. The film does get some things right though. Jann really did drop out of a motorsports engineering course shortly before he was selected for GT Academy, and he really did beat out 90,000 hopefuls. One of the major sources of tension in Gran Turismo is the relationship between Jann and his father Steve.
You think you're gonna play a stupid video game about cars and you're gonna become a race car driver?
Steve is a former professional football player who seems to favor Jann's more athletic younger brother. He thinks esports are a waste of time and insists that their family doesn't belong in the world of competitive car racing. Jann spends much of the movie trying to earn his father's respect and prove him wrong. It is true that Steve Mardenborough played professional football for more than a decade, and it's true that he wanted his son to love the sport as much as he did. However, he was more on board with Jann's obsession than Gran Turismo lets on. The film goes out of its way to show that most race car drivers have wealth and connections. That's also true, to an extent. Before GT Academy, most drivers got their start in karts. Jann had been intensely interested in cars since infancy and was introduced to the Gran Turismo game by a family friend at age 8. Around the same time, Steve took him to train and compete in the kart circuit, where the local track owner assured the retired footballer that the boy had talent. Sadly, the kart track closed when Jann was 11, at which point the sport was proving to be too expensive for the family anyway. Steve didn't know about his son's GT Academy ambitions because Jann was shy and didn't tell him about the opportunity until after he'd qualified. If Gran Turismo feels familiar, it's probably in part because it features an archetypal character, the hard on the outside, soft on the inside mentor, Jack Salter. He's gruff, no-nonsense, and honest to a fault. Initially reluctant to train the young guns, he eventually sees that Jann in particular has what it takes on and off the track.
This whole thing is insane, but out of the couch surfing nerds that you sent me, he is the best one.
Later on, we discover that Salter left racing because of a horrific accident that he couldn't put behind him. Over the course of the film, he and Jann established a close bond, with the former coaching the latter to a podium he never got to stand on himself. The relationship between the engineer and the driver is arguably the heart of the movie, but it's also the filmmaking team's biggest invention. Jack Salter wasn't a promising race car driver in his own right, because he doesn't exist. David Harbour's Jack Salter isn't based on a particular real-world driver or pit crew leader. While GT Academy graduates had mentor figures throughout their careers, someone named Salter wasn't one of them, and Jann didn't have a single engineer shepherding him through the ranks of his new profession. In the movie, Jann's journey from GT Academy hopeful to winner is a short line between 2 points. He's identified as one of the best players in the world and competes in one digital race, and then he's whisked off to GT Academy. Then, Moore and Salter put him and the other contestants through a battery of physical and mental tests to determine whether any of them might be capable of holding their own against professional racers. The Academy students are eliminated one by one until 5 remain. Jann, who's running in 6th place, is nearly kicked out after he crashes during a trial run with Salter in the passenger seat. This would have pleased Moore, who is concerned with his lack of press readiness.
If you miss a line in the game, you reset. You miss it on the track, you could die.
As biopics are wont to do, Gran Turismo condensed and dramatized this period of Jann's life to fit neatly into the first third of the movie. The actual GT Academy's processes changed from year to year, but in 2011, both in the United States and Europe, they involved an online time trial, a national virtual championship, and a regional in-person racing camp that lasted for about 6 weeks, with roughly 5 hours of training a day. The contestants were regularly on camera, since the entire endeavor was broadcast as a reality show, with eliminations occurring until a final 4, as opposed to 5, drivers remained. The culminating race was held at Silverstone in the United Kingdom. Jann was the winner and received a year of continued development to transition him into his new career. The middle part of Gran Turismo takes place at GT Academy's racing camp, as Jann and 9 other Gran Turismo experts are put through the paces. His competition includes Maddie Davis from America, Marcel Duran from France, and other wannabe racers from across the globe. Jann starts out in the middle of the pack, and it's hinted that the frontrunner, camera-ready Maddie, might have previous experience driving actual cars. The characters we meet in these scenes are not the people Jann really competed against in 2011. There were 12, not 10, finalists hailing from the United Kingdom, Italy, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Iberia, and their names are wholly different from those that appear in the Gran Turismo cast list. The American camp hosted 16 additional finalists. However, Jann did tell the Motor Culture podcast that his competitors did have more experience than him behind the wheel. Prior to GT Academy, he'd never actually driven on the highway. Every story needs a villain. Gran Turismo has the entitled, obnoxious Nick Kappa and his gold-clad team of yes-men. Salter starts out working for Kappa as a mechanic. However, he quits and changes his mind about GT Academy and Moore's offer, and Kappa refuses to listen to his advice. Later, when he's in Jann's ear during his first professional race, he warns his young mentee that Kappa drives dirty. Sure enough, Kappa rear-ends him, causing Jann and Team Nissan to finish 27th. In another race, Kappa's aggressive driving causes a crash, which Jann narrowly avoids.
Whoopsie.
Dude, what is your problem? It's part of the game. It's called racing.
Finally, after his accident at Nürburgring, Kappa leads a group of professional drivers in a campaign against simulation drivers getting spots on the track. As you may have guessed, the cartoonishly awful Nick Kappa is yet another completely fictional character. Jann told the Motormouth podcast that the vast majority of professional drivers were welcoming of GT Academy graduates and good sports, and there was no organized effort to stop sim racers from joining the sport. He could only recall one instance in which another competitor taunted him. The Kappa-like top-rated driver said, "If you see me in your mirrors, don't fight me. Let me go." For the record, Jann beat him. After Jann wins GT Academy, the next obstacle he has to overcome is obtaining his racing license, which we're told he can only do if he places in the top 4 during his first season of driving. After his 27th place performance, he gets 23rd in Germany, 17th in Italy, 8th in Istanbul, and doesn't finish in Barcelona, which sets up a race in Dubai as his last shot. Just as he'd beaten Maddie Davis in a photo finish at the camp, he gets the 4th place he so desperately needs by the skin of his teeth in Dubai. Jann did cap off his first year at Dubai, but the stakes were slightly different, as were the particulars of the race itself. In real life, he'd already gotten his license, won a race, and made the podium 3 times by the time he got to Dubai. Jann's concern was whether Nissan would continue to fund his racing career. The Dubai 24 was basically the prize for winning GT Academy. There were no guarantees he'd have a job after that. Jann competed in a team of 4 drivers for Nissan. The race, like Le Mans, lasts for 24 hours, with teammates taking shifts as the day goes on. Team Nissan, which was entirely made up of former GT Academy winners, placed 3rd, and Jann learned at the after-party that his contract would be extended. Controversially, Gran Turismo includes a recreation of the crash that could have cost Jann his career and his life. In the film, just as his star is rising and his parents are beginning to take him seriously as a professional driver, Jann's car goes vertical on a hill at Nürburgring. The the vehicle is lifted into the air, where it flips and spins until it comes crashing down on the other side of a chain-link fence and into a crowd of spectators. Jann is rendered unconscious and taken to the hospital. When he comes to, he learns that one of the spectators was killed. His mother and father are thrilled that he was discharged without injury, but an emotionally wounded Jann refuses to see anyone. The crash itself happened almost exactly as is depicted in the film. Multiple spectators were injured, and one did die, while Jann received only routine checkups. The controversy has to do with at what point the horrific accident occurs in this fictionalized retelling. The real Jann Mardenborough crashed at Nürburgring in 2015, 4 years after he won GT Academy, and 2+ years after he placed third at the Dubai 24 and Le Mans. He was already an established driver at the time, but Gran Turismo moves the tragedy up and makes it into a plot point on Jann's path to greatness. Some find this decision offensive, but Jann told the Sunday Times Driving, "It's my life, it's part of my story, so I feel it would have been a disservice for the audience for that not to be in there." In the movie, a recovering Jann is ready to hang up his keys, as it were. He blames himself for the accident, and even buys into the idea that sim drivers have no business racing real cars. Salter, who has a painful past of his own involving an accident and a death, refuses to let Jann make the same mistake he did. He comes clean about why he left the sport, then insists that a still banged-up Jann finish his lap. The strategy works, and Jann gets back behind the wheel. The real Jann needed no such motivation. Though he told ESPN that he feels massive guilt that will never go away about the fact that someone lost their life, he also confessed that he never once thought about quitting because of the incident. He told the Sports Network, "This is what I'm born to do." Less than a week after the violent crash, he was doing laps at his local track again. The climax of Gran Turismo takes place at Le Mans, a famed 24-hour endurance race in France, in which teams of 3 drivers compete for a prestigious trophy. Jann's teammates are his former GT Academy rivals, Matty Davis and Antonio Cruz, but it's clear that he's the headliner. Up until this point, our protagonist hasn't made the podium, and champagne has been referenced over and over again, so the audience can pretty safely assume that Team Nissan is going to end up in third. That's exactly what happens. After Cruz's legs cramp up and a tire change goes awry, Jann comes from behind to once again come out on top in a photo finish. This isn't how it went down in reality. Turns out Jann and his team actually finished 4th initially. They were notified that they'd been promoted to a podium-worthy finish when the 3rd-place team, G-Drive Racing Oreca Nissan of Delta ADR, had been disqualified. By the time that news came, the awards ceremony had already taken place, which meant Jann never actually stood on the Le Mans podium as he does in Gran Turismo.